the war in the Middle East. And then I want to get to the economic and market implications as well. But for now, it appears the latest is Iran has once again rejected a peace proposal, restated their demands for having total control of Hormuz. Meanwhile, of course, the Trump administration's messaging is switching back and forth from they're willing to take a deal, they're begging for a deal, whatever a deal means in Trump's mind, I don't even know anymore. And then to, well, we're going to hit them hard if they don't accept the deal. It looks like Iran is actually preemptively starting to strike U.S. bases in the Gulf states. What are your thoughts on how this is all unfolding at this moment in time, and how do you anticipate it all playing out from here?
Well, first of all, the war is not over. And that's something that is not widely believed here. You know, Trump and his friends on Wall Street and in the media have been very successful in manipulating the markets and the population by saying every other week, we're close to a deal. The war is going to end. Things are going to get better and so forth. It's all nonsense. There are no talks between us and the Iranians. None. People need to understand that he's just lying, okay? I hate to be blunt, but that's what it is. And this war is going to go on. Now, I have been told that they have flown in a number of additional jet fighters, and I'm beginning to hear that you've got every B-52, B-1 and B-2 bomber that they can load up and ship out to fly strikes on standby to do so. So my perception is that they utilize this time to reinforce their position because remember, after the last round, a number of aircraft were released and sent back to the United States along with crews. And so the perception was, well, I guess we're going to have an agreement. And secondly, you'll recall that Donald Trump, when he was in Paris at Versailles, he was presented with the 14 points and he signed it and everybody clapped. And he said, well, I don't want to be Herbert Hoover and responsible for a global depression. And all of us said, you know, thank God someone has gotten to Donald Trump. He's figured it out. That turned out to be wrong. So I think we're headed into another round. And I think he's going to try and do what he said, which is a massive, massive punch that he hopes will unhinge the regime. We say regime, I'll just say government. And I think the Israelis are pushing this very hard. Remember, he was put into office by Zionist billionaires who paid for his election. They now have, as I found out this morning from Larry Wilkerson, they've got two funds, one about 140, 150 million, the other $750 million. And this money is to be used to destroy anyone who will not support Israel and to support anyone who will. So that's where we are. And I think the people that have paid for everything want him to honor the payment. Now, that doesn't mean that he's immune to what I call the gambler's fallacy. And the gambler's fallacy here is obvious. We just have to throw everything we have. We got to hit all of those targets. We have some new ones and we'll knock them out. Okay, well, we've heard that before. I don't think so. But that's where we're headed.
I was going to bring this up later, but you mentioned market manipulation, insider trading. I'm wondering what you make of that, because a huge part of this war seems to involve moving markets through announcements or tweets or social media posts by the president. We've seen both the broad market and especially the energy market be very affected when it looks like peace is on the table. The oil market falls, the broad market rises, and then when it seems the war is back on, it reverses. And it seems like there are insiders making an awful lot of money who know in advance when these announcements are coming out. Do you see that as kind of strangely an integral part of this conflict for the Trump administration and the insiders involved?
I think it's a benefit of the conflict. It's something that he's used to enrich himself and his friends. You also have to look at who are the people that own the media. I mean, Larry Ellison is one of your key Zionist billionaires. It's paid for all sorts of things for Trump. He controls much of the media. You have to go through all the people that control. They're all on the same team. So if you go on Fox News or MSNBC Business, doesn't matter. What are they going to tell you? They're going to tell you what Trump wants you to believe because that's what they want you to believe because they want this war. They're also behind the war in Ukraine against Russia. I mean, this is not new. It's the same groups of people that are prosecuting this. In fact, I was looking at my own experience during the Kosovo air campaign, and it dawned on me we had something very similar then with the same kinds of people, some of whose descendants, believe it or not, like Tony Blinken, have shown up later to push war with Russia or push war against Iran. And the Congress is essentially bought and paid for. They're not going to stand up and present any resistance. So I think the world is his oyster at the moment. And I think what he's trying to desperately do is rescue himself from ignominious defeat. And he's not prepared to retreat and admit that he's being defeated. That works, of course, to the advantage of the Israel lobby and everybody else who wants war.
Now, the closure of the Strait of Hormuz seems to be ongoing. The Strait of Bab el-Mandab also appears to be at risk of closing. For most in the West, we haven't really felt this dislocation in supply chains, at least not fully yet. Do you think there will come a moment where perhaps all at once we start to see the effects being felt in terms of empty grocery store shelves, shortage of gasoline at the pump, and a sudden spike in price inflation?
The answers are yes and yes. Now, I would defer to people like Jeff Curie and Pilkington and some others who know more about the oil markets than I do. But I think Jeffrey Gundlach, Luke Groman, and others will all basically tell you the same thing. What Trump has done by manipulating the markets is postpone a lot of the pain. Now, we still have a rise in prices for things. And I was just down in Wilmington, North Carolina, and I was able to track the rise in prices in different places. It's obvious. It was much more expensive to buy gasoline up where I am near Washington, D.C., than it was in Wilmington, North Carolina. But the point is the prices are rising, yes. Have we hit bottom in the strategic petroleum reserve? Well, I'm told we haven't yet, but we're getting very close. So I think he has managed to postpone the pain. I don't know how much longer that's going to work. Now, the other thing that's happened that we shouldn't lose sight of, nobody talks about this in the United States. Your supply chain structure globally has changed. The world is adapting to what has happened. So in some places, you can't keep an electrical vehicle on the lot from China. Everybody wants to buy them up. The Chinese are pushing them very hard. That's all designed to reduce your reliance on petroleum. They're also buying a lot of coal. They're very interested in coal that is low in sulfur and puts out a lot of heat. We've got that in great volumes in this country. We should be making a killing on coal. I don't know if we are or not. I was involved a few years ago in that, and I told everybody, don't give up, hang in there. You're going to sell all the coal you ever wanted in the future. But it's turned out to be true. So there's a combination of adaptation overseas in many countries. And of course, in some places, you still have nuclear power. The French very wisely kept their nuclear power plants running. The Germans are now plugging into nuclear power from France, which is interesting. They were dumb enough to completely shoot themselves in the foot. So what would I say? I would say yes. It's temporary. We're going to be hit with this like a ton of bricks in the fall. That's my prediction.
Do you have any thoughts on the gold market here? Because we saw both gold and silver sell off in the initial start of the war. They've corrected quite considerably since reaching all-time highs earlier this year. And on today, we're recording this on August 5th. We are seeing both metals start to rise quite dramatically in one day. Of course, one day's price data does not mean anything. But again, the metals have kind of followed the war narrative in the same way that the broad market has, rising when it looks like there could be peace, or when Trump says there's going to be peace, falling when the war is back on. What do you make of that, and your overall thoughts on the gold market here?
Well, let's keep in mind that the cost of oil that's coming off the ship right now in a barrel is $140 per barrel. So it's not the paper price that Wall Street promotes. It's already $140 a barrel. Now, when you go into the gold markets, I think we have to understand that you're 100% correct. Those markets have tended to follow the larger commodity herd. in terms of not really recognizing or acknowledging yet what's really going on. The question is, what is the mechanism that drives it? Okay, the gold issue. So let me take a stab at that. First of all, I would urge everybody that has time to take a moment and go to Gareth Soloway's website. Gareth Soloway is a very solid trader, and that's a big advantage. You got lots of people like me and others who different backgrounds who sort of prognosticate from the bleachers, but he's in the arena, and he has some interesting things to say. And he points out that the federal debt, in 1980 was 0.9 trillion. Today, then it went to 14.8 trillion in 2011, 39 trillion today. Well, if you look at those numbers, gold is going to be your safe haven when this collides with reality, or let's say when the reality collides with fantasy. And I think we're dealing with a lot of fantasy right now. So repricing is therefore the rate at which global money outruns gold's near fixed quantity. That's the issue. And the arithmetic is complex, but I think we have to look at the behavior of central banks. Central banks have been buying this stuff, gold, for years. They're not stopping. They're continuing to buy gold as much as they can get. And other countries that are in a lot of trouble are doing two things. Some of them are selling their gold because they need cash. And in other cases, you have people selling treasuries to generate wealth so that they can maintain the standard of living in their countries. I think the Japanese fall into one of those two camps at this point. We just dumped large numbers of euros from, I guess, a euro slush fund that we've got. I don't know where it came from, into Japan in order to prop up the Japanese yen. And what you get is a similar perception. Just as people are saying, oh, well, the war is over and everything's going to go back to normal. It won't. You're never going to go back to normal. And then secondly, oh, well, Japan's fine now. We've propped it up. Wrong. We've postponed for some period of time, I don't know how long, the collapse of the yen and Japan. And who is linked to the yen and Japan? We are. If Japan collapses, that's going to have a huge impact here. And the same thing is true in the oil markets. I think, we're having trouble understanding why interest rates are rising and bond yields are rising. Most of us were taught that if the interest rates rise, the bond yields fall. They're not falling. We're at 4.7%. And virtually everybody I know says that if you hit 5, you're toast. We can't service the debt. And how much are we paying right now to service the debt? Well, it's way over the defense budget. That's more than $1 trillion. I guess so. When I'm trying to understand gold, my point is this. I think Soloway said we'll be paying $13,000 an ounce by 2030, 2031. If everything stays the same as it is now, that's going to happen. Well, I don't think it's going to stay the same. I think the war is going to continue. The outcome of this conflict is going to be much worse than anybody thinks. We can talk about that. I think you're going to be looking at 15,000 an ounce over the next 2 to 3 years. In other words, before Soloway's prediction comes true, we'll be at 15,000. Now, why do I say that? What are we doing right now? We're fighting effectively a Jewish war. That's what the Israel lobby wants, and they have wealth behind them, enormous quantities of cash. But it is now coincided with something else, a new reason to be stupid, I would say. We have to maintain our military and financial hegemony. And so it's a war to preserve what's left of American global hegemony, as well as to satisfy the Israeli appetite for Jewish supremacy in the Middle East and the destruction of Iran. It's all going to fail. I mean, that's my view. I think it's too late for all of these things to work. And I'm not sure that Donald Trump doesn't understand that. But I think, again, he's going to give it one more push in the hopes that he can bring down Iran. And people supporting him fall into one of these two camps. Either you're doing it because you're a Zionist and you want this to happen, or you're worried about America's national hegemony, which I would argue is an illusion. And that's kind of where we are right now. And who's against our hegemony? Well, I would argue most of the world, but who's leading it? Russia, Iran, and China. Those three great powers. Now, many years ago, Zbigniew Brzezinski, whom you may remember, who was the national security advisor for Jimmy Carter, wrote in the 90s that we should undertake everything we can to avoid this triumvirate from rising to power. He said if that becomes a reality, American military power, financial power will be driven off the Eurasian continent. I think we're there. And remember that our partners in the region, I don't want to say allies, we don't have any treaty of alliance with Israel. We don't have any treaty of alliance with the UAE or Saudi Arabia. None of the things that we associate with alliances in Europe. But those partners have all witnessed something. We can't protect them. And at some point, somebody, especially if we go back in now, I don't know if it'll be the Saudis or the Emiratis. I have no idea, but they're going to say, it's time for you to get out of here. You've already failed. We will not survive this war unless you stop. And I think we're headed in that direction right now. So if he goes back in again, I think that'll end it for us in the Middle East, period. And if it ends it for us, what does Israel do? It's not exactly surrounded by friends.
Yeah, great point. I want to dive into what you mentioned, that you think the outcome of this war will be far worse than people believe. Could you unpack that for us and what you believe the ultimate outcome could be?
Well, I've said for a long time that if he doesn't stop and back out of this and essentially disengage, we're going to send the world into a global depression. Now, most people in the United States think we'll have a hard recession. I think it'll be worse. I think we're going to see bank runs. I think the banking system is very fragile. Now, there are other people that, you should talk to. James Grant can talk about that. He's another expert on gold. I think Alistair McLeod has a better grip on that than I do. But I see these things happening. Americans have not experienced anything like this. They haven't experienced the collapse of their currency, which is eminently possible. And we're into this problem right now, as I'm sure you're aware. China is building a fortress of gold. And everybody that is associated with them is going to do business with them in gold. And it's going to be very attractive to many countries, especially those countries that are heavily indebted in our system. Remember, we control the World Bank. We control the International Monetary Fund. We're the ones that screw everyone we don't like with the use of our financial system. What if they just say, well, the hell with you. We renounce our debts. We're joining BRICS. I think that could happen. Now, I don't think it's hopeless, because even though we may have a fiat currency crisis, I'm one of these people, and this is going to sound strange to some, who thinks that Bitcoin could come in as a very handy device as a store of wealth. I hope I'm right. I'm not 100% sure. But if your currency suddenly is in trouble, you don't have the gold that you need to back your position, and most of it is sitting in Shanghai and some other vaults like the one in Riyadh or the one in Hong Kong. Bitcoin then becomes another means of doing business. And I thought it was interesting that the Iranians accepted Bitcoin payment from ships until the latest closure. They were moving through the Strait. So everything depends now on Trump going back in again for a final, showdown, which I think he will. Now, the other thing that's going to happen, that's going to be tough on us, is that our military power is going to be painfully exposed as not being what it's cracked up to be. All right? It's not the end of the world. It happens to everybody at some point. But then what do you do? And everyone in Washington has opposed every effort to reform, reorganize, and restructure the American military over the last 80 years. And every general and every admiral has worked tirelessly to stop change. So if we go into this depression, as I think we will, we're going to have to deal with a military that needs, how's the right, radical surgery. And we're going to have to do it in an environment of very few funds compared to what we've had in the past. So we're going to move from abundance to scarcity. Now, Jesse, what happens when you move from abundance to scarcity in a society like the United States that has had everything forever? You get a revolution.